How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Kuf Yud, Daf 110 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. Well, what can I tell you? Today's the first time it rains in Eretz Yisrael today. It rained today for the first time in Eretz Yisrael of the season. Now, of course, I managed to get sick. Yeah, I already have a cold. First day, I already have a cold. Alright, we'll see how it goes. What am I going to tell you? Well, today's an interesting daf in some ways. We talk about documents and interesting document arrangements and arguments that can be made. Interesting stuff. Still on the Admon stuff. And then, wow, yeah, my throat's like getting. Oh wow, do I have to buy tea and honey already? Like that's how it's gonna be? I guess so. But Lamaisa, the honey over here at Nitzat Duvdevan, is that what it's called? They have a pretty geschmack of honey, I'll tell you. Anyways, so I might have to be in the tea and honey zone already. All right, and then, friends, and then this is the important thing. We start getting into the Eretz Yisrael sugyas, friends. These are big famous sugyas. So really, tomorrow we're going to get into the most famous of them all. But so cool stuff going on. But it's also not a small daf. So here we go. Says the Mishnah on daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph all the way at the top. Hamotzi shtarchov al chaveiro v'hala hotzi shemachar lo es hasodeh. Adman Omer Yachulu Sheyomar Ilu Ayisi Chayiv L'cha Hoy L'cha Lipareh Es Shelchok Shemach what Kishe Macharta Li Es Asada V'Chachom Omer Zay Pikeach Shemachlo Es Akarkim V'nei Shu Yachul Mashkenon. Wow, friends, who can tell me what the case is? The case is a situation where Ruvain has a document, and in the document, Ruvain has a document that says that in January he lent Shimon $1,000. Shimon pulls out a document that says that in February he bought a field from Ruvain. So again, Ruvain pulls out a document that he lent Shimon $1,000 in January. Shimon pulls out a document in which it's recorded that Ruvain sold him, Shimon, a field in February, right? Ruvain lent Shimon money in January, and Shimon bought a field from Ruvain in February. So now, says the Mishnah, start from the beginning. Amotzi shtarchov al chaver. So Ruvain pulls out a document that says that Shimon owes him $1,000, and that was written in January. V'hala hotzi, and Shimon pulls out a document in which it's recorded shemachar lo es hasodeh, that Ruvain sold to Shimon a field in February. Admon Omer, so Admon says, Yacholu sheyomar, Shimon can make the argument, Ilu ayisi chayiv l'cha, hoy l'cha lipareh shelchok shemacharta li es hasodeh. Friends, you hear Shimon's argument? Admon's saying that Shimon can make the following argument to Ruvain. Ruvain, your document is fraudulent. Your document is fraudulent. Ruvain, you're pulling out a document right now that says that I owe you $1,000. That doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make any sense? Because you sold me your field in February. Your document says I borrowed $1,000 from you in January. Okay, great. But I obviously paid that back already because you sold me a field in February. If I owed you $1,000, why would you sell me your field? Kilu, you should be like, yo, I'm not selling you anything until you owe me $1,000. Pay me back first. So the fact that you were willing to sell me your field, clearly you were paid, clearly that debt was already settled before you sold me your field. Otherwise you wouldn't have sold me a field if I owed you $1,000 already. So therefore that's Shimon's argument to say, from the fact that I have a document in which it's recorded that you sold me your field in February, clearly I had already paid back the loan from January. Whereas the rabbis argue, punkt fakert. Ruvain is being very smart over here. No, that's exactly why Ruvain sold Shimon the field. Ruvain lent Shimon the field. Ruvain lent Shimon $1,000 in January. He hasn't gotten paid back yet. Comes February, Ruvain's saying, all right, I don't know if Shimon's paying me back. This is what I'm going to do. This is my plan. I'm going to sell Shimon a field for $1,000. Right now it's February. He says, I'm going to sell Shimon a field for $1,000. And like this, he's going to pay me $1,000. And then I'll be able to collect the field back from him as a deposit, right? That field will now be a deposit will act as a deposit, and I'll be able to collect back the field in place, at least until he pays me back the money. So Shimon is arguing, well, let's say this. According to Admon, Shimon can argue that you wouldn't have sold me the field if I owed you money. The Chacham are arguing dafka the opposite. That's exactly why he sold him the field, so that Shimon would buy the field from Ruvain, pay Ruvain $1,000 for the field. Ruvain can now say that this field that I just sold you, I'm taking back as a deposit until you pay me back the $1,000 that I lent you. Very, very elegant. Says the Gemara, my time of the Rabbanon, Shaper Kamer Admon. So the Gemara says, one second. Why do the rabbis say, what problem do the rabbis have with Admon's argument? Admon says that Shimon could say, look, you wouldn't have sold me the field if I owed you money. You would have just taken the money back, right? You would have first made sure to get what you were owed before selling me the field. So, be'asr de yaive zuze v'ader kazve shtaret. Okay, so if we're in a locale where the custom is that first the money changes hands and then they write a document. So therefore, if Ruvain sold Shimon a field in February, what would have happened is that Shimon would have first had to pay Ruvain, and only afterwards they would write the document. Well, if that's the case, Kuliamulo Plige, then both Admon and the Chachamim agree, Dematzi Amrle, that Shimon can make the claim, Look, everyone agrees that if it's a place where Shimon would have first had to pay Ruvain before they could write the document on the transaction of the field, well then obviously, if Ruvain comes with this document from January that says that Shimon owes him $1,000, and Shimon comes with a document from February that says that he purchased the field from Ruvain, well then, yeah, in that situation, clearly Shimon can make the argument to say that, look, Ruvain, that makes absolutely no sense, because since the minig where we live is that I would have had to pay you before you wrote the document, so when I paid you, you would have just would have said, right, if I haven't paid you back for the loan yet, you would have just said, wait, you just paid me for the field, but you owe me money, I'm taking this as the loan, and I'm not giving you the field, and the document would have never been written. So therefore, Shimon's going to argue that from the fact that I have the document, clearly means that I paid you back for the loan, because if I hadn't yet paid you back for the loan for the original loan at the time that we were, working out the transaction for the field, I would have had to pay you first, and you would have just taken the payment at that time for the loan. And the fact that you went ahead and created the document clearly means that I had already paid back the loan, which is why you accepted the money for the field and went ahead and wrote the document afterwards. Ki plige, where the machlokas between the Chacham and Admon is, be'asur dechas ve'shtarev v'hadar yai ve'zuze. It's in a place where the minig is punkt fakert, that first they would write the document and only afterwards do they get the payment. So Admon saver ibayle lemimsar moda. So Admon, who says that Shimon can make the claim that, hey, you wouldn't have sold me the field, right? That you wouldn't have sold me the field if I owed you the money. And now the Chacham are saying, however, but he's got a whole scheme that he's going to sell the field and then he's going to use that as collateral. But Admon says, look, if that's his whole scheme, then he should have told witnesses, look, I'm gonna sell Shimon the field, but really it's only so that I can take it back as a collateral. From the fact that he didn't do that, it must mean that he was already paid back, because otherwise, he really wouldn't have sold the field. Whereas v'chacham omrim, v'abanan save, whereas the rabbis hold chavra islay, v'chavra dechavra chavra islay, whereas the chachamim say that no, Ruvain is not going to say that in front of witnesses, because once you reveal your intentions, the walls of ears, Keilu. These witnesses, their friends are going to find out. Word's going to get back to Shimon. Shimon is no longer going to buy the field from Reuven once he knows that it's only going to be used as a collateral against him. So therefore, according to the rabbis, Reuven can just, it was actually a good play by Reuven. He kept his mouth shut. He sold Shimon the field in February. Now he gets the money for the field from the purchase, and then he can also use the field as a collateral against the loan. I need to sneeze. Excuse me. Yeah, he uses the field as collateral for the loan that he gave. Okay, fine. Very, very good. Interesting stuff. Oh, if you have two fellows who whip out documents against each other, right? So Reuven whips out a document in which it says that Shimon owes him $1,000. Shimon whips out a document in which it says Reuven owes him $1,000. So we have, okay. So again, Shnaim shotziu shtarchov zel zeh. So you have Reuven and Shimon, they whip out documents against one another. Admon omer, ilu ayisi chayiv l'cho ketzerata lova mimeni. Admon says, look, Shimon can make the argument that says, Reuven, that's crazy. Reuven, you're showing me a document right now that says that you lent me $1,000 in January. I'm pulling out a document that says that I lent you $1,000 in February. If I hadn't yet paid you back and I still owe you this money, and you had lent me $1,000 in January, why in the world would you then borrow $1,000 from me in February if I owed you $1,000? You shouldn't be borrowing $1,000 from me. You should be asking to get paid back $1,000. So from the fact that I, Shimon, have a document that says that I lent you $1,000 or that you borrowed from me $1,000 in February, clearly I must have paid you back, because otherwise you wouldn't have taken out a loan from me in February if I actually owed you money. Whereas the Chacham say, whereas the Chacham say, no. Reuven collects his debt, Shimon collects his debt, and we all go on with our lives. Says the Gemara, Itmar, it was stated, Shnaim sheotziu shtarchov ze al ze. So if you have Reuven and Shimon whipping out shtarchovs against each other, these documents against each other, Rav Nachman Omar zegove v'zegove. So Rav Nachman says, okay, they both collect. Rav Sheshes Omar hafuchi matarto lomali. Whereas Rav Sheshes says it's basically pointless. It's pointless. They're basically just going to be swapping the same exact thing. Like, I give it to you, you give it back to me. What's the whole point? So now we're talking about, so now when you lend somebody money and there's it's recorded in a document, so you can, if they don't pay you back, so you can collect property. So now, says the Gemara, right? So the rather says Rav Sheshes, it makes no sense to just, I give it to you and you give it back to me, so just keep what you have. Fine. Now the chule alma idis ve'idis, benonis u'benonis, ziboris ve'ziboris. Okay, so now both Rav Sheshes and Rav Nachman agree that, if both Reuven and Shimon have the same quality field, so then there's really no point in paying each other, because, Reuven will collect, the field from Shimon. Shimon's going to collect it back. You're just swapping the same thing, so there's really no point. Vade afuchim atartahu. It's clearly just swapping the same thing, and there's no point. Ki plige, where there's this machlokas between Rav Nachman, who says that they do swap, and Rav Sheshes, who says that it's pointless. Ki plige de isle lechad benonis ulechad ziboris. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. That what if, are people yelling? Maybe. They might be yelling. Maybe not. It's unclear. People are making a lot of noise. The question is if it's the neighbor yelling at them. Anyways, so everyone agrees. Well, no, not everybody agrees. Where it gets into, where even am I? Here's the thing. So when it comes to a loan, right? So if Reuven loans money to Shimon and Shimon doesn't pay back Reuven, so Reuven can collect property from Shimon, but he collects Beinonis. There's 3 levels of fields. There's Edis is the highest level of fields. Beinonis is the mid-range field, mid-level fields, and Ziboris is the lowest level fields. A creditor is entitled to collect the mid-range fields. So now we have this machlokas between Rav Nachman, who says that they collect from each other, right? Reuven whips out a document, Shimon whips out a document, they collect from each other. And so the machlokes of Nachman, who says that they collect from each other, and Rav Sheshes, who says it's pointless. So it's talking about a situation where Ruvain has a Beinonis field, and Shimon has a Ziboris field. And now what happens is, Shimon collects from Ruvain Beinonis, and then Ruvain collects back from Shimon Ziboris. That's exactly what it is. Okay, right? So Ruvain has this document, Shimon has this document, and now Ruvain has a Beinonis field, a mid-level field, but Shimon he only has one field, and it's a Ziboris field. It's a lowest level field. So what's going to happen is, when Shimon collects from Ruvain, he's going to collect Ruvain's Beinonis field, right? When you have a creditor, so creditor collects a Beinonis field. So Shimon's going to collect the Beinonis field. But then what happens is, Shimon now has two fields, a Beinonis field and his Ziboris field that he had all along. Now, that relatively speaking, that Beinonis field is now his best field. It's his Edis field. It's right relative to him, it's his top field. So therefore, what can Ruvain collect back? Not the Beinonis, he collects the Ziboris, the lower level field is what he collects back. So Shimon's collecting from Ruvain Beinonis, but Ruvain is collecting from Shimon Ziboris. So there's two separate fields. That's why Rav Nachman says that they're not just swapping the same thing, they're actually two different fields, right? And it depends how you define Beinonis. So let's see. So let's look at it inside. So the machlokus between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes is when Ruvain has Beinonis field, Ulechad Ziboris, and Shimon only has a Ziboris field. Rav Nachman Sover, so Rav Nachman who says that they swap, Zegove v'Zegove, that they each collect, it's because they're collecting separate things, different things. Kosover b'shaloin shaman. Because Rav Nachman holds that how do you define a Beinonis field? There's two ways that you could define a Beinonis field. One way to understand Beinonis is it's relative to your other fields, right? So therefore, if you own, a whole bunch of fields, so even if all of the fields are, let's say, low quality fields, but relative to each other, some of them are going to be lower, the lowest of the low, some of them are going to be the highest of the low, some of them are going to be in the mid-range. And therefore, Beinonis is relative to the fields that you have, the creditor can collect somewhere in the mid-range. That's one way to understand Beinonis. The other way to understand Beinonis is it's a global standard. That a field that's a certain global quality would be considered a top level field. A field that would be considered a certain global standard would be a Beinonis field. And ones that are of lower standards would be Ziboris field, right? So it depends, how do you define Beinonis? So, Rav Nachman, right? So because b'shaloin shaman. So Rav Nachman, who says that they swap, it's because he says that Beinonis is relative to his own fields. So therefore, Asi Baal Ziboris, so Shimon, who has the Ziboris field, V'gavile Beinonis is then going to collect from Ruvain, his field, which is a Beinonis field. Why are people yelling outside? To have a Gabe Edis. So then, when Shimon collects Ruvain's Beinonis field, Shimon now has two fields. His Ziboris field and the Beinonis field that he collected from Ruvain, but we're saying that Beinonis is relative to his fields. Well, relative to his fields, this Beinonis field that he collected from Ruvain is now his top field. So that's going to be considered Edis. So Ruvain can't collect that because it's Edis. He's not entitled to collect the Edis. So what does Ruvain do? He has no choice but collect Ziboris from Shimon. So Shimon's collecting Beinonis from Ruvain. Ruvain is then collecting the Ziboris from Shimon, so they're not just swapping the same item. They're two different fields that are changing hands. So therefore Rav Nachman says that they swap. For Rav Sheshes Omer, Hafuchi Matar Tolamali, whereas Rav Sheshes argues, what do you mean? They're just swapping the same exact field, Kosaver B'Shal Kol Adam Ein Shaman. Because he says that no, Beinonis is a global standard. And therefore, if Shimon takes Ruvain's Beinonis field, Ruvain is just going to take it right back. right? Shimon's going to take Ruvain's Beinonis field. Ruvain's not going to look at Shimon's fields. He's got a Beinonis and a Ziboris. He's going to take back the Beinonis because Beinonis is a global standard. It's not relative to Shimon's other fields. And therefore, Sof ki osi au Beinonis denafsha koshakil. And therefore, at the end of the day, Shimon's going to take Ruvain's Beinonis. Ruvain's going to take Shimon's Beinonis right back. And therefore, he's just taking his own thing back. And therefore, Rav Shesha says it's pointless. Alright, let me go see what the yelling's all about. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm not sure what the yelling was all about. Alright. So, Rav Nachman, my chaz is the osi bal ziboris bereisha leisi ba Beinonis bereisha. Oh. So, the Gemara asks a Gevaldig Kasha. We've been assuming now that Shimon is the first one to collect, right? I mean, according to Rav Nachman, it says that they swap. So that assumes that Shimon is first collecting from Reuven the Beinonis. And because since he collected first, now he's got two fields, the Beinonis and the Ziboris. And then Reuven has no choice but collect back the Ziboris. So therefore they're two separate, quality fields. And therefore Rav Nachman says that they could swap. But what if it was Punkt Vakert? What if Reuven first goes and collects the Ziboris from Shimon? Now, Reuven has a Beinonis and a Ziboris. Shimon can't collect the Beinonis because that's relatively speaking Edis, and therefore he's just going to have no choice but to take the Ziboris back. So if Reuven's the first one to collect, then there really is no point. Legabe, right, Veligbe Ziboris, right, what if Reuven collects first, in which case he's going to collect Ziboris, Legabe Veligbe Nile, in which case Shimon's just going to be taking it right back. And isn't that pointless? So lo tzricha dekadim tvae. Well, it's talking about where Shimon claimed first. But sof kiasu lemigbe ba'adei adodi kasu. But at the end of the day, they're coming to Bezdin together. They're coming to court together. Reuven saying, you owe me money. Shimon saying, you owe me money. They're coming together. Nobody's coming first. Excuse me, I think I'm going to sneeze. So ela lo tzricha de is le lechad idis uveinonis ve'is le lechad ziboris. Oh, so the Maisa, what it's talking about is that Reuven has, excuse me, I have to sneeze. Reuven has Edis and Beinonis, right? He's got two fields, an Edis field and a Beinonis field. V'eslei lechad Ziboris. And Shimon has a Ziboris field. Okay. Marsava b'shalo ein shaman, u'marsava b'shal kol adam ein shaman. Oh. And therefore, right, so therefore, Rav Sheshes, who says that it's pointless, is because since they're coming together, and Beinonis is a sort of global standard according to Rav Sheshes. So since they're coming to Bezdin together, so Bezdin is just going to say, well, Reuven's the one with the Beinonis field. Shimon, why don't you collect that? And the Reuven's just going to collect it right back. So it's really pretty pointless. But according to Rav Nachman, so because they are relative, so then either way they're going to be collecting different things, right? Let's say Reuven collects first. So therefore, Reuven would be collecting the Ziboris from Shimon. Then Shimon would be collecting the Beinonis from Reuven. And if Shimon collects first, so first he'll collect the Beinonis from Reuven, and then Shimon will have no choice but collect the Ziboris from Reuven will have no choice but to collect the Ziboris from Shimon. So therefore, in that case, so according to Rav Nachman, there would be what to collect. According to Rav Sheshes, there's no point in collecting. Fine. Tanat, we learned in our Mishnah, v'chacham om zegove v'zegove. So the Chachamim say that they both collect. Now, Tirgma Rav Nachman alibad Rav Sheshes. So our Mishnah had said that they collect from each other, right? Reuven and Shimon both whip out documents, so they collect from each other. Now, Rav Nachman says exactly that they collect from each other. But Rav Sheshes had said that it's pointless. So how does Rav Sheshes understand the Mishnah? So Rav Nachman explains for Rav Sheshes, Kigon shelova zeh le'eser v'zeh le'chomish. Now that's interesting. Well, what if Reuven, well, we're going to have to figure out who's doing what, but let's just say for now, what if Reuven lent Shimon $1,000 in January, but he said, Shimon, pay me back in 10 years. You have plenty of time. And then Shimon lends Reuven money, and he lends him $1,000 for 5 years. Okay. So what are we talking about? So if we're going to say that Reuven lent Shimon $1,000 and says, pay me back in 10 years, and Shimon lends Reuven $1,000 and says, pay me back in 5 years, Behad lema Admon, but then would Admon really say, Ilu ayisi chayv l'cha ketzarat love mimeni? Well, if that's the case, Admon's argument, if you remember in our Mishnah, right before we got to the 5 years and 10 years thing, if you remember in our Mishnah, Admon's argument was that if Ruvain's whipping out a document that says that Shimon owes him $1,000, and Shimon's whipping out a document that says that Ruvain owes him $1,000, so Admon said, well, Shimon can make the argument that he doesn't have, that he already paid back Ruvain, because if he hadn't, why would Ruvain borrow money from Shimon when Shimon owes Ruvain money? Right? Why would Ruvain borrow money from Shimon if right? Why would Ruvain borrow $1,000 from Shimon if Shimon actually owes Ruvain $1,000? That doesn't make sense. But if we're saying that Ruvain had lent Shimon $1,000 and said, pay me back in 10 years, well then, he didn't actually, right, the payment wasn't due, so how would Shimon be able to make that argument according to Admon that, why would you borrow money from me if I owed you money? This money isn't due yet, it's not due for 10 years. So, Ella, Rishon l'chomesh, v'sheni le'eser. 1 second, excuse me, there's noise outside, I have to look into this. So interestingly, it's actually distracting me. So, one of the chevre, David Steinberg, he plays the French horn and also the trumpet. He's a gewaldiger Yid. So he's playing some Shlomo Kabach nigunim. He must not know that I'm recording Babylon Talmud. But you probably shouldn't tell him because he might feel bad. No, he's a good Yid. He should play Shlomo Kabach nigunim. Alright, I'll just have to focus a little better. Okay, Rav David Steinberg. How can you say anything negative about Rav David Steinberg? It's Yoreh Shamayim. So now, okay, so where am I? So Elarishon l'chomesh v'sheni le'eser. So rather, but my it's a shtickle distracting. So rather, Ruvain is lending. So Ruvain lent Shimon money to be paid back in 5 years, and then Shimon lends Ruvain money to be paid back in 10 years. Heichidami. So what's the dealio? Idim mata zimnei. So if at the time that Ruvain borrowed $1,000 from Shimon, the 5 years was already up, and therefore Shimon at that time owed Ruvain $1,000. So my taima derabanan. Then what's pshat with derabanan? Doesn't Admon's argument make sense that Shimon should be able to say, why would you borrow $1,000 from me if I owed you $1,000? V'dilomat zimne. And if the 5 years is not yet up, well, halomat zimne. Well, then the 5 years aren't up. My time to Admon. Well, then how come Admon would say that Shimon can argue, well, if I owe you money, then why would you be borrowing money from me? But he doesn't owe him money. The 5 years aren't up. So, lo tzricha da'asa ba'u yoma. So it's talking about where this Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon when there was just 1 day left to the 5 years. 1 day left to the 5 years. That's when Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon. So the Mishalim, right? Ba'u Yom the Mishalim, the Mishalim, Chomish. Ma'asaver Ovid Inish Diazif Liome, Ma'asaver Lo Ovid Inish Diazif Liome. So Admon says that, look, Shimon can make the argument, like, I don't understand. Why would you borrow money from me if you could have just waited 1 more day and then I would owe you $1,000? So according to Admon, Shimon could say it doesn't make any sense that you would borrow $1,000 from me if you would just wait 1 more day and I would owe you $1,000 and you wouldn't have to borrow it from me, you would just take it from me. Whereas a Chacham would say, look, people do it. If you needed the money, you needed the money. You couldn't wait another day. You didn't want to wait another day, whatever it was. And therefore, yeah, it could be that Ruvain borrowed money from Shimon, even though if he just would have waited 1 more day, then he would have been owed that money. But, according to Chachamim, look, he borrowed the money anyways, and both documents are valid. Fine. Rami Bar Chama Amar says, Rami Bar Chama Acha b'yasmei askinon. Here we're talking about orphans, right? That meaning, so Reuven and Shimon, had their different documents, but then Shimon dies. So now we have the orphans over here. So you have Reuven who has this document that he's owed money from Shimon's estate, and Shimon's heirs have a document that says that Reuven owes them money. So the Yasme Migba Gabi Agbuir Lo Magbinan Minayu, that the Yisomim can collect from Ruvain, but Ruvain cannot collect from the Yisomim. Right? Because and it's talking about a situation where they don't have any property, and therefore, right, they don't have any property, and therefore, and they can't collect any, right? A creditor can't collect from the metaltalin of the Yisomim, only from property. Excuse me, I have to sneeze. And therefore, since the Yisomim don't have any property, so Reuven has nothing to collect from them. But the Mishnah says that they collect from each other, and we're saying that Reuven cannot collect from the Yisomim. No, it means that one party can collect, the other party is entitled to collect, but practically speaking can't because there's no land to collect. Omar Ravish the Ksubis ba'dover. Rava responds to him. Barcham says, I have two things to respond. Chada de zegova v'zegova katani. My first question is that the Mishnah says that they each collect, not that one collects and one can theoretically collect, but is unable to in practice. That's not what the Mishnah says. V'od binu ara liyasme. But also, why don't we just say, let the Yisomim, the heirs, first collect property from Ruvain, and then once the heirs now have Ruvain's property, let Ruvain now go and collect it back from them. That if orphans collect property that is owed to their father, so well, if they have creditors, those creditors can now take that property from them. Kasha. So that's taka a guta kasha. Velukma de islu liasme ziboris veisle lidide idis uvenonis. Why don't we say that it's talking about a situation where why don't we say that it's talking about a situation where the Yisomim have a ziboris field and Ruvain has Idis and Benonis fields. The Azle Yasme Gavu Benonis, that the Yisomim will collect from Ruvain the Benonis, Umagbule Ziboris, and then Ruvain is going to collect from them Ziboris fields. Dinami B'Shel Kol Adam in Shomin, because even if you say that Benonis is based on a global standard, that you only collect from the property of Yisomim from the Ziboris, and therefore we could say that right, that's how you can explain that they would collect, right? That Ruvain that the Yisomim would collect the Benonis from Ruvain. Ruvain would only be able to collect the Ziboris from the Yisomim, and therefore that's why they would collect one from the other. In this case. Yeah, but that only works, right? Meaning, Reuven is supposed to collect the Ziboris from the kids, but if he went and chapped the Rein Benonis from the kids, so then he would be able to keep it. And here, Reuven basically is already in control of the Benonis, so it's basically like he already went and grabbed it. So therefore, it would kind of stay there, and it wouldn't be a situation where meaning we were saying that if the Yisomim would collect the Benonis from him and he would collect the Ziboris, so then they would collect from each other. But here it's just a situation where he basically, it's as if he already went and just, even though he wasn't supposed to, collected the Benonis, then he can keep it. So he already has the Benonis, so he could keep that as well. So, okay. So you can't see that the Mishnah is talking about that. Okay, now we get to a new Mishnah. And this is a very, very interesting Mishnah. We start getting into Gemaras about making aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. We're getting sort of close to there. So let's see. So Shalosh Arotzos L'Nisuin. There are three parts of Eretz Yisrael when it comes to getting married. What this means is that excuse me, there's more yelling. 1 second. So this means that if you get married in one part of Eretz Yisrael, so then, you can't be expected to move to another part of Eretz Yisrael. So Shalosh Arotzos L'Nisuin, there's three parts of Eretz Yisrael when it comes to marriage. Yehuda ve'Yarden ve'Galil. Judah, the other side of the Jordan, and the Galilee. And Motzin me'ir le'ir, and mikrach lechrach, right? So I can't, ask you to move from one city in Yehuda to another city in the Galil, right, or from one metropolis to another metropolis. Aval ba'osa ha'aretz, but within, let's say, Yehuda, motzi me'ir le'ir mikrach lechrach. But within Yehuda, let's say, you can, right, you can be asked to move from one city to another city within Judah, or from one metropolis within Judah to another metropolis. Avalo me'ir lechrach, but nobody can be expected to move from a city to a metropolis, not from metropolis to a city, even if it's in the same area. Motziin. So 1 second. So just in terms of, I don't like saying metropolis and cities. Krach and ir, right? The point is that, as we saw recently when Rebbe died, so there's three kinds of cities. There's the Krach, which is the metropolis, that's the biggest one. There's the Ir, which is like in the middle, and then there's the Kfarim, which are the villages. So you can't be expected to move from a Krach to an Ir, or from an Ir to a Krach. Fine. You can be asked to move from a Shvache abode to a Givaldige abode. But you cannot be asked to move from a Givaldige abode to a Shvache abode. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, af lo minove ra lenofe yofe. You also cannot be asked to move from a Shvache abode to a Givaldige abode. Because when you move to from a Shvache abode to a Givaldige abode, you tend to get sick. The Gemara is going to explain why. B'shlomo mikrach le'ir. So now the Gemara says, I understand why you can't be expected to move from a krach, from a metropolis, the Ir, to a smaller city. To be krach, shchiche komile, because in a metropolis, you have everything you need. New York City. What can't you get in New York City? Chveis nicht. Fine. Be'ir lo shchiche komile. But in a city, I mean, okay, look, I live in a city, it's a Gewaldige city that we're going to learn about very soon. I mean, let's not talk about the city I live in. I don't want to, it's uncomfortable. There are other cities that maybe they might be proper cities, but they're not New York City. You know what I'm saying? You might not be able to get everything. I don't know what's an example. I'm not going there. So, lo shchiche komile. So Elami ir the krach my time, but why can't I? Why should I? Right? Why should there be anything wrong with moving from a city to a metropolis, to a place where there's everything that you could possibly need? This supports Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina's statement that how do I know that actually living in a metropolis is not so poshut? As Rashi says, there's 1 million people there. And it's tight. And all the houses are on top of each other. There's no air. Imagine if these people are writing this 1,500 years ago, or Rashi's writing this, 1,000 years ago. You can only imagine what he would think if he goes to New York City, or imagine going to some places in India or whatever. Although I've never been to India, only in the airport. Maybe one day I'll go. Alright. Have I been to cities like that? I can imagine New Delhi or something is probably... I don't think I've ever been to a slum. Nor do I necessarily want to. But anyways, yesh ganos right, but aval be'ir yesh ganos ufardesim smuchim lebatim v'avir and yafet. Like here, I'm in a city. I'm in Yerushalayim. There's mamash a park right outside my house. Exactly what he's saying. Ganim ufardesim. We have ganatut over here. We have parks for people to sit in and make noise. Smuchim lebatim, right next to the houses. Yeah, it sounds exactly like Yerushalayim. V'avir and yafet. Oh, we have good air in Yerushalayim. The air in Yerushalayim. What isn't good in Yerushalayim? If Shuk Machne Yehuda, anything you want. Yeshiva is krachim cautious. I don't know that living in a metropolis could be shver. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Vayivarchu ha'am l'chol ha'anashim ha'misnadvim l'sheves b'Yerushalayim." That he blessed all the people who were volunteering to live in Jerusalem, because it was I guess at the time, or I don't know if Jerusalem now would be considered a metropolis, but at the time, at least, let's say it was a metropolis. And so therefore they had to bless the people who were volunteering to live in the metropolis. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, that you can't even be expected to move from a shvacha abode to a gevaldige abode. My bodik, he says it's because by moving from a shvacha abode to a gevaldige abode, you're going to get sick. Why would you get sick? That a change of routine gets you sick. When you have a change of routine, you get stomach aches and stuff. So therefore, it says Shmuel, it's about a change of routine, and that gets you sick. Ksubis b'sefer ben sira. So therefore, if you move from a shvacha house to a gevaldige house, it might be gevaldig, but the change of routine can get you sick. Ksubis b'sefer ben sira. It's written in the book of Ben Sira. Kol yimei ani ra'im. That all of the days of a pauper are shver. V'ha'ika Shabbosos v'yom tovim. What do you mean all the days? What about Shabbos and Yom Tov? Right? Because of the Shabbos oneg. Shabbos is a delight. It's like Shmuel says, that but the change of routine gives you a stomach ache. So meaning, Shabbos is gevaldig, but if you're used to eating all day, all week, your mom is used to eating nothing, and then once a week you have maidonim, it can also get you sick. The change of routine. Ben Sira Omer, and it continues in the Sefer Ben Sira. Af leilos, a pauper even at night. Bishval gagim gago, his roof is lower down than all of the other roofs. Uvimrom harim karmo, and his vineyard is at the top of all the mountains. That's what's available for him. Mimtar gagim ligago, and because his roof is the lowest of all the roofs of all of his neighbors, so when it rains, all the rain ends up on his roof. Umei offer karmo lechromim. And since his vineyard is at the top of the mountain, when the wind blows, all of his good fertilizer gets blown onto the lower vineyards, and they're benefiting from his fertilizers. So therefore, it's pretty shver. Okay, now says the Mishnah, Hakol Mailin the Eretz Yisrael. Friends, you hear this? Dude, we're going to get in some serious Gemaras over here. Man, particularly tomorrow is the big political Gemara, the big controversy, big controversy. But already here, do you make aliyah? Right, what does the Mishnah say? Hakol Mailin Eretz Yisrael. That, as we're going to see, anybody in the family, right? The husband, the wife, they could force, if the husband says, that's it, we're moving to Eretz Yisrael, that's it, we're moving to Eretz Yisrael. Ve'ena kol motziin. And if the husband decides that, no, we're making Yeridah, we're moving back to Tinek. So you can't do that. Hakol Mailin Yerushalayim. The husband can decide, that's it, we're moving from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim, ve'ena kol motziin, and he cannot say we're moving from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv. Echad ha'anoshim ve'echad ha'anoshim, and this could be the man, it could be the woman, anybody, right? The wife says, that's it, we're moving to Yerushalayim, they're moving to Yerushalayim. Nasa isha be'eretz Yisrael, if a fellow marries a woman in Eretz Yisrael, v'gersha be'eretz Yisrael, and divorces her in Eretz Yisrael, nosi lo mimos Eretz Yisrael, so he's going to pay that document in shekels. Nasa isha be'eretz Yisrael v'gersha be'kaputkaya. If he got married in Eretz Yisrael and divorced in kaputkaya, the currency was more valuable than Eretz Yisrael. Kind of like now, right? The dollar is stronger than the shekel. So if he gets married in Eretz Yisrael and divorces her in kaputkaya, nosin lamamos Eretz Yisrael, he pays her in shekels, which is not going to be as much as if he was paying the same amount in dollars. The same numerical amount, right? 100 shekels versus $100. So Nasa Isha b'Kaputkaya v'Gersha b'Eretz Yisrael. If he marries a woman in Kaputkaya and then they get divorced in Eretz Yisrael, also Nosin Lami Mos Eretz Yisrael. Still from Mos Eretz Yisrael, it's going to be the lower amount. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Nosin Lami Mos Kaputkaya, whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says no. If he got married in Kaputkaya, so then he would have to pay the Kaputkaya currency, which is more expensive. If they get married and divorced in Kaputkaya, Nosin Lamamos Kaputkaya, so he pays her in the Kaputkaya currency. Says the Gemara, when it says that the let's say the husband can force everybody in his household to move to Eretz Yisrael. Everybody, everybody to include who's the Chiddush over here? Lasuya Avodim. That if he has an Eved Ivri, they live in Teaneck, New Jersey, and they have an Eved Ivri, and I guess they don't really do that so much anymore. Eved Ivris. And he says that's it. We're moving to Yerushalayim. We're moving to Eretz Yisrael. So the Eved Ivri needs to come with them. And according to the one who explicitly includes avodim, so then what's hakol including? Even if they, in Tinek, they live in a geschmake house with everything that you might need, a geschmake golus, and then they move to Eretz Yisrael and they're going to be stuffed into a small little apartment somewhere in Eretz Yisrael. Still, they're moving to Eretz Yisrael. And when it says that he cannot compel anybody to make yirida, what's that coming to include? Lasui eved shebarach mechutz laaretz. It even includes that if you have an eved Kenani, I believe, who ran away from michutz laaretz who ran away from Eretz from chutz laaretz to Eretz Yisrael. The Aminan lay, right? So we say that we can't send him back to chutz laaretz. We say sell him over here, vizil, and then and go back. Meaning keep the eved here and send the money back. Mishum yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, because we want because of the mitzvah of yeshivas Eretz Yisrael to live in Eretz Yisrael. When it says that, right, that you can compel everybody to move to Yerushalayim, what's that including? Even if in Tel Aviv you lived in a beautiful apartment, and in Yerushalayim the only thing available is a not so beautiful apartment, still you move to Yerushalayim. When it says that also you don't right, that you can't leave Yerushalayim, right, unless if the people don't want to. Even if in Yerushalayim you live in a not so nice house, and in Tel Aviv there's something nicer, still you don't do it. But isn't that obvious? Meaning, if we're saying that when you move, right, you can move from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim, even from a nice house to a not nice house, and obviously you wouldn't be able to force everybody to move from Yerushalayim to Tel Aviv from a not nice house to a nice house. We just said that even to move from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim from a nice house to a not nice house, you do. So then certainly you wouldn't move back. The whole point is that you move to Yerushalayim. Well, since we had mentioned in the first part, in terms of moving to Eretz Yisrael, we had mentioned the Ein Motziin part, so we mentioned it in the Seifa also, but yeah, we didn't need to mention it in terms of the nice house thing with Yerushalayim. Tanu Rabban and the rabbis taught, Hu Omer Lalos, V'Omer Shlo Lalos. If the husband says, we're moving to Eretz Yisrael, and the wife says, no, we're not, Kofin Oso Lalos, we force her to move to Eretz Yisrael. V'Im Lab, and if she's unwilling to go, Teitze Blo Ksuba, well then she can get divorced and forfeit her Ksuba. He omeres lalos. If she says we're moving to Eretz Yisrael, Vu omer shelo lalos, and he says no, we're not. Kofin oso lalos. So we force him to move to Eretz Yisrael. Vim lab, and if he's still unwilling, Yotzi v'tein ksuba, he can divorce her, and he'd have to pay her ksuba. He omeres lotzes, hu omer shelo lotzes. If she says that's it, we're moving back to Teaneck, New Jersey, and he says no, we're not. Kofin osa shlo lotzes, so we force her to stay in Eretz Yisrael. Vim lab teitziv lo ksuba, and if she's unwilling, so then they can get divorced and she will not receive her ksuba. Hu omer lotzes, vi omeres shlo lotzes. If he says we're moving back to Teaneck, New Jersey, and she says no, we're not. Kofin osa shlo lotzes, so we say no, you got to stay in Eretz Yisrael. Vim lab yotzi v'tein ksuba, and if he's unwilling, so then they get divorced and he's going to have to pay her ksuba. No, so isha v'chulei. So we said depending on where you marry the woman, that's if it's shekels or dollars or whatever. So agufa kasha, I don't understand. On the one hand, katani nasa isha be'eretz Yisrael, v'gersha b'kaput kaya. On the one hand, we're saying that if he gets married in Eretz Yisrael and divorced in kaput kaya, nosin lemamos Eretz Yisrael, he pays her in shekels. Alma baso shibuda az linon, which means that we go based on where you were at the time of the shibud, at the time that you took on the responsibility for the ksuba, i.e., so we're saying that if you got married in Eretz Yisrael, and that's when you took on the responsibility of the ksuba, and then you got divorced in kaput kaya, and you paid the currency of Eretz Yisrael, so it goes based on the time of the responsibility. But ema seifa, but then we say no. So isha b'kaput kaya, if he gets married in kaput kaya, v'gersha b'Eretz Yisrael, and they get divorced in Eretz Yisrael, no lemamos Eretz Yisrael. So he pays her in shekels, the money of Eretz Yisrael. Alma basa govaina az linon, which means that we go based on where it's collected, not based on where the responsibility was accepted, and it's being collected in Eretz Yisrael. So Amarabba mikule ksuba shanukan. So Rabba says that we're being lenient over here. Kasav ksuba derabanan, because ksuba is derabanan, right? So because ksuba is only midirabanan, so we can go based on the lower value. Shimon ben Gamliel Omer says Shimon ben Gamliel Nosalam Mimos Kaput Kaya that if they get divorced if they got married in Kaput Kaya and divorced in Eretz Yisrael, he would pay the Ksuba in the currency of Kaput Kaya. Because of Ksuba Doraisa, because he holds that Ksuba is Doraisa, and therefore by Shtar Doraisa it goes based on where the responsibility was accepted, and that was in Kaput Kaya. Therefore, you pay the Kaput Kaya currency. Taner Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Hamotzi Shtar Choval Chavero. If somebody whips out a document against his friend, not a ksuba, a regular document, Kosovo Bavel, if the location written in the document is Bavel, Megabeu Mimos Bavel. So he collects in the currency of Babylon. Babylon, not Babylon. Babylon. Kosovo Eretz Yisrael, if the location in the document is Eretz Yisrael, Megabeu Mimos Eretz Yisrael, so then it's collected in the currency of Eretz Yisrael. Kosovo Stam, if it just says, if there's no location. So Hotzio beBavel, if he's collecting it in Bavel, Magbeu b'Mimos Bavel, so then collect it in the Babylonian currency. Hotzio Beretz Yisrael, if he's whipping it out in Eretz Yisrael, Magbeu Mimos Eretz Yisrael, so then you collect from the currency of Eretz Yisrael. Kosovo Kesef Stam, if it just says silver, but that's all it says. So Masha Yirtze Love Magbeu, well then the borrower can just pay it back with any kind of silver. Regardless of if it's like a more expensive coin or a least expensive coin, any kind of silver. Masha'en came b'chsuba, which is not the case by the ksuba. Hey, what's not the case by the ksuba? Misharsha areisha. It's talking about the first part, right? That meaning we had said that if the location is Bavel, so then we collect the Babylon, right? It's the Babylonian currency. If it's Eretz Yisrael, it's the Eretz Yisrael currency, regardless of where you are right now. It's where the responsibility was taken. And then we say Masha'en came b'ksuba, which is not the case by the ksuba, that the ksuba is always going to be the least expensive value, the less expensive value. La'afukin de Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, the ksuba d'oraisa, to the exclusion of, right? This is not like the opinion of Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that ksuba is d'oraisa and would always go based on wherever the responsibility was, but we're saying this is not the case by the ksuba, that it goes just whatever the less expensive one is, because it's ksuba is derabbanan, not like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Kosovo kesef stam mashiyirtze love magbeu. So we said that if it simply says silver, but no more details than that, so then the borrower just pays whatever whatever silver he wants. Ve'ema naska, maybe I'll say that it's a bar of silver. It says specifically a coin, a silver coin. So maybe I'll say it's just the lowest. Oh wow, that's the Shabbos horn. I thought I would have extra time. This stuff is taking a really long time. So maybe it's the lowest possible silver coin. So people don't make prutas out of silver. Okay. One of the rabbis taught, a person should always live in Eretz Yisrael, even if it means that he's living in a city where most people over there are idolaters. He shouldn't live in Chutz La'aretz. Even in a city where it's like all Yidden. Because anybody who lives in Eretz Yisrael, he has a God. And anybody who lives in Chutz La'aretz, it's as though he does not have a God. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Losei Lochem, it says it's Canaan, to give you the land of Canaan, Leos Lochem Lelokim, to be for you a God. Wait, what does it mean? What, somebody who lives in Teaneck, New Jersey, he doesn't have a God? It means anybody who lives in Chutz La'aretz, it's as if he's idling. He's idling. He's just idling. It's like he's worshipping idols. Getchkas. V'chein b'David Omer, and it says by King David, Ki gershuni hayom mistapeach b'nachas Hashem, that they drove me out today from being in the inheritance of the Eibishter, lemor, to say, lech avod Elohim acherim, go and serve these other gods. V'chi mi amar lo leDavid lech avod Elohim acherim, who told David to go and serve other gods? El lo ma'lecha kol adar b'chutz la'aretz ki'ilu oved avodas kachavim, rather to say that anybody who lives in Chutz La'aretz, it's like he's serving Getchkis. Wow. Fire. Alright friends, I gotta go celebrate the Holy Shabbos. That was Daf Kuf Yud of Masechet Ksubis. Friends, we're mamish getting towards the end of Masechet Ksubis. Tomorrow we are going to have a juicy political daf. Peace out.